IDE Psych. Thought I'd change up the scenery a little bit on this chilly day, so I've got the fireplace going on. It is Wednesday. We've got pretty heavy lecture today, so I'm going to get this thing going. Just a couple of reminders for you. We have our Human Growth and Development Reader's Notebook that you are turning in. The philosophy was that you did this HGD notebook before our test that we took a couple weeks ago. So all you have to do is somehow either take pictures of it and post it into a document and upload it, or retype it into a document, however you want to do that. So technically it's not supposed to be extra work that you're doing this week, but if you didn't do that reader's notebook on the off chance I wouldn't collect it, you need to get that done by April the 19th at 11:59 p.m. So that's just my reminder there. There is the assignment where you're going to upload it. It's on our main page above the week 5 quarantine, all right? So just to let you know, somebody asked me, when is our next reader's notebook going to be due for thinking, language, and intelligence? And my guess is it's going to be due right after the April, where we were supposed to have our spring break. We are going to take a day off in there. I'll talk more about that later. But that would be my anticipation, is that the due date will be coming up in the next week or so. Okay, so I'll get more finalized with that as soon as we get through probably this lecture and give you a better idea on Friday. Okay, so I'm going to turn off The Cure, another great 80s band if you haven't investigated them. I'm going to turn them off, and we're going to get started with today's lecture. So we've been talking about language. When you guys watched Genie, you have a brief response in regards to Genie. And now we're going to move on to intelligence. Okay, so we are going to talk about what is intelligence today, and you're going to learn about the development of intelligence testing. As you can see on our agenda here, this is your agenda. We will have a short DICE assignment response just to double check that you watched the lecture. All right, so you have a new subset of notes that we're taking today, and we're going to be talking about how is intelligence defined, how is it measured, and then we'll briefly talk about what can intelligence be attributed to, and mostly talking about these levels of intelligence. So this slide is just kind of a review slide of what we're going to be doing and talking about intelligence. Again, this is just a quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still be able to function. Kind of a funny quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald. All right, here we go. So, intelligence. If we give intelligence a definition, intelligence is the capacity to learn from experience and adapt successfully to one's environment. Let's break that down. This is the capacity for us to be able to take an experience and our ability to use our memory, which we talked extensively about first semester, and how our memory works with the working memory, the short-term memory, the long-term memory, that whole system. So it's the ability to recall experiences from our past or even our present and adapt it into the environment in which we're working with. That is the most general idea of intelligence in terms of a definition that we can use to define what is intelligence. Okay, so with that in mind, keep in mind that we're going to look at intelligence from many different angles. Some people will say intelligence is, yes, this definition, but intelligence may be your level of creativity. Intelligence may be your ability to do math, your ability to write, your ability to read, or your ability to draw or create music. So in terms of intelligence, we needed a generalized definition that could fit all different areas of what people have theorized intelligence is. Basically, intelligence reflects how we function. So just kind of a note there. All right, so people have tried to quantify intelligence. How do we measure intelligence? And just as there are many different lenses to look at intelligence, there are also many different ways that people have come up with how to measure intelligence. So some of the ways that you're very familiar with, some I'm going to introduce you to, all right, in this section of this subunit. You guys are very familiar with our first way of measuring intelligence, and that is achievement tests. Achievement tests show what you have learned. We'll have an achievement test coming up here soon on our unit of thinking, language, and intelligence. That is an achievement test. It's going to measure, our unit test will measure what have you learned. So many of you are used to these types of achievement tests. School is based around achievement tests. The ACT, the SAT, even though it was originally designed not to be an achievement test, has now become an achievement test. They are achievement tests. This is what colleges will use to measure what have you learned in the past, not just your GPA, because your GPA may not show fully what you've learned, simply because, maybe freshman, sophomore year, we didn't really care about our grades so much. Okay, so the ACT is a test that would tell them where do you score on a bell curve of what you've learned in comparison to other students in the nation. There are also what we call aptitude tests. They are predictable of your ability to learn new skills. Okay, so the SAT was originally designed to be an aptitude test. It has since evolved into more of an achievement test, but it still has some aptitude questions. But a true aptitude test is going to look at not just what you've learned, but predict your ability to learn new skills. So a great test that I can refer to that may help you to understand what an aptitude test is an AccuPlacer, okay? All of you that are taking this class had to take an AccuPlacer test to get into the dual enrollment college level psychology class. It predicts your ability to do well in this class by measuring your reading and writing skills, okay? For those of you that are going into the armed forces, you'll have to take the ASVAB. The ASVAB test is an aptitude test. It tells the military what skills you would be best at so that they can put you in the right divisions of the military once you've decided, am I going Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines, and where they're going to put you, what your job is going to be once you're in the military and gone past the basic training. So those are achievement tests versus aptitude tests. Those are two things you need to keep straight in your head for our test that will be coming up, which I'll talk about that format later. It is going to change slightly from what we did last time in our online learning. The last type of test that I'm going to spend most of the day talking about is intelligence tests. These are tests that are specifically designed to measure your intelligence. But that's where it gets tricky. What is intelligence? Is it your ability to read and write? Is it your ability to logic? So there are numerous intelligence tests out there. And right now you could probably type up a Google search of an intelligence test and get an intelligence test that's going to tell you your IQ. Okay, I'm going to explain that why I use these quotes of your IQ, because a lot of the intelligence tests that are out there for the public are not actually what we call standardized, validated, and reliable tests. Okay, so I want to talk about these IQ tests and what's true IQ tests and what's just kind of out there and maybe get your money or just for fun. So let's start off with the story of Binet Simon. So Binet Simon was the first to develop the first type of intelligence test, an IQ test. This was in 1905. France, the country of France, was really annoyed with the educational system as it was, that, you advance grades based on your age. They didn't like that because there were definitely some people, and we all know this, that were 15 and in their 10th year of schooling, but they should have really kind of maybe been in their 8th year of schooling because of their maybe lack of skills, or, as was theorized, their intelligence. So Binet-Simon was commissioned by the country of France, the French government, to develop a test that would not just allow kids to advance in grade because of age, but would allow kids to advance in grade because of their intelligence score. Are they truly a score of a 5th grader? Are they truly a score of a 10th grader? Okay. So Binet-Simon creates an instrument that would assign mental age based on the number of items of correct. So mental age, not chronological age. Okay. And he develops this thing, and it was meant for kids. And they used it for a while. They classified children in regards to their mental age and what grade they should be. Here's where the story twists. Here in the United States, Stanford University gets a hold of the Binet-Simon scales in about, I think it was the 1920s. You can check me on the history of that. But gets a hold of those Binet-Simon scales and says, well, this is for kids. Is there a way we can check adult IQ? And so they start to tweak the instrument, and I'll explain why they needed to tweak that here in a second. So they start to tweak the instrument, and they develop the Stanford-Binet scales, okay? And so originally something that was designed to track education in France becomes something that they are going to use for adults in the hopes that maybe employers can use this test and say, you need to have this kind of intelligence score to work for our company, or people just wanting to know what's their intelligence. Okay, so that's kind of the history of what we call the Stanford-Binet. The Stanford-Binet, I'm going to explain to you, is one of the few intelligence tests that is what we would consider a reliable and valid intelligence test. Okay, so anything else that's passing themselves off as an IQ test or an intelligence test, you want to question, what is the reliability, what is the validity of that test? Does that test, 1, produce consistent results, and 2, test what it's supposed to measure? Okay. So here's how the Stanford-Binet scales worked after the University of Stanford gets a hold of them. They converted the scale into a single score. This is your IQ, or what we know as your intelligence quotient. Okay, so when we say an IQ test doesn't just stand for intelligence test. It's an intelligence quotient. Okay, so the formula, and star this in your notes, is mental age over chronological age. So the test is going to tell us your mental age. We're going to divide that by your chronological age, and then we're going to multiply that by 100, because 100 is the base score. Okay. So, for instance, a 6-year-old with a mental age of 4. So if we take 6 divided by 4, okay, they would have a below average IQ, because 100 is the base score, 100 is average. So if we take 6 divided by 4, doing it on my calculator, and we multiply that by 100, sorry, it's taking me a second, multiply that by 100, they would have a below average IQ, okay? And it's 150, and I'm not sure why that's not standardizing. Oh, because they had to standardize it, sorry. If we take a 6-year-old with a mental age of 6, they would have an average IQ. They're going to average 100, okay? If we take a 6-year-old and they have, oh, I know why. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go back. We take 4 divided by 6, because it's mental age divided by chronological age, multiply that by 100. This kid right here has a below average IQ. They have a 67 IQ. Over here, if we take the Mental age of the child, let's say they're testing at a 10-year-old level, but they're only 6. We divide that 10 divided by 6, multiplied by 100, they have an above average IQ. They'd have 167 IQ, which is about Einstein level. Well, when you do this doesn't work for adults, okay? It worked for kids. So we have to standardize this for adults, okay? Remember, the test wasn't originally designed for kids. Stanford and Binet are going to take this quotient and standardize it for adults. All right, so here's why it doesn't work. If you have a 60-year-old man, does well as an average 30-year-old, all right, tests like a 30-year-old intelligence, his IQ would be 50, which is way below average because 100 is average. All right, hoping that makes sense. Okay, so here's what Stanford-Binet does. And I'm going to move myself up into this corner here so that you can see this. They standardize a test. When you standardize a test, you base it on a bell curve, okay? So 100 is our base score. So it's going to start right in the middle. That's going to be our mean in this bell curve. 1 standard deviation away is right here, okay? That's going to be a score of 115 on the intelligence test. 1 standard deviation minus from the mean is going to be an 85. And when you standardize a test to a population, this gets into the whole statistics thing. If you're creating a bell curve, 68% of your average American is going to fall between 1 standard deviation above or below the mean. So we should see majority of Americans scoring on an IQ test like the Stanford-Binet anywhere between an 85 score and a 115. Now, 2 standard deviations would be a score of 130 on the positive side, or 2 standard deviations away from the mean would be a 70. Those people that fall within this grouping right here, these 2 standard deviations would consist of 14%, okay? 14 and 14, all right? Those people are 2 standard deviations from the mean. And then you would have a group of people that would fall within the 2nd and 3rd standard deviation, and this is a very small population that would score above a 130 on an IQ test or below a 70. Okay, Ms. Rivera, what does that mean? We're going to talk about that. Give me one moment. All right, so this test, the Stanford-Binet, is standardized to a bell curve. So here's what it means. Do you need to know all these groupings? No, we're going to talk about some of the groupings, but you do not need to write every single one of these groupings. So remember, average, okay, the borderline or the average score is 100, all right? So the lower average or higher average, remember 100, so about 99, higher average 100 to 114, or lower average 85 to 99, okay? Then you can see that we get all of these other qualifications. We're going to talk heavily about this lower average, below average, borderline, and low here in a few minutes. Right here, 115, so 1 standard deviation away, to 129 would put you as above average IQ. Gifted at 130 to 144, and anything above 144 considered a genius. Let's talk about those categories, or one of those categories, here in a second. You are going to take the Stanford-Binet. We'll probably take that, I believe, on Friday. So many of you are probably a little bit afraid to find out your scores. That's common. I will say there's no way you could be taking this DE class if you weren't able to score at least in the lower average all the way to the genius, okay? I don't think I've ever really had anybody score less than actually probably the higher average. It would be very difficult to get into the 2nd semester or Psych 102 without having a average IQ score. So please don't be afraid of the IQ test. I'll talk more about that later once we get to Friday's lecture. Now, extreme intelligence, mental giftedness is going to be an above average of 130. If you score above average of a 130, I believe it's a 135 now that Mensa requires. So Mensa is an organization for gifted adults. If you pass the Stanford-Binet with a 135 or more, you can belong to Mensa. The issue is that I am not a certified Stanford-Binet psychologist, meaning that I don't have a certification to give the test as a legitimate test. What I'm going to be giving you guys is a bootleg copy. And so me personally, because I don't use an IQ test in sports psychology, the test you're going to take would not be a legitimized test to qualify for Mensa. You would have to take a legitimized test to qualify for Mensa, speak to a psychologist, school psychologist, or counselor, and how you would do that. So if you do score over a 135, you're going to get a big yay from me. But that's it. You would have to talk to your school counselor or to a psychologist that could give you an official Stanford-Binet test. If you qualify for Mensa, here's what happens. So first of all, you would be considered in the top 2% of the population in the nation. And usually if you qualify for Mensa, you get a little card that you can carry in your wallet that says you're Mensa. And you get a monthly newsletter that says, hey, Mensa people are meeting in Denver on whatever date. And maybe you can meet somebody else who's Mensa and you have really intelligent babies and there you go. That's about the benefits of Mensa. There are some scholarships for Mensa members. So you may want to look into that. I would say that would probably be the biggest perk about being a card-carrying member of Mensa, other than being the guy that walks around going, I'm the card-carrying member of Mensa. So that's about it. Let's talk about the other side of the scale. I think this is more important. So extremes in intelligence when it comes to the other side of the scale, the lower half of the bell curve. When a person takes the intelligence test and they score one standard deviation below the mean, that is a red flag for us. The intelligence test was never designed to tell us whether or not somebody has a disability. It was designed to tell us, should we be looking at what is going on with that person and what kind of a disability they may have, okay? So the intelligence test, the Stanford-Binet, is a red flag test. It's part of a battery of tests that we would use, that if a person scores a 70 or below, now we're going to probably try to do more testing to find out what is going on with that person. All the Stanford-Binet tells us is there is something going on with that person. So these categorizations have not really changed much. The word retardation is still used in categorizing people that score one standard deviation below the mean in the Stanford-Binet. So mental retardation, you are considered mentally retarded if you have an IQ below 70% or 70%. Mild retardation, you would qualify as mildly retarded if you score 50 to 70. Now, that we don't know what that means exactly. Diagnosis of mild retardation. It's not a diagnosis. We would just know a person qualifies that in their IQ testing, and now we have to do more tests to find out what qualifies them as mild retardation. So 85% of the people who are considered mentally retarded usually fall within this category. 85% of the people who are mentally retarded usually fall within this category. Just want to make that straight. Not 85% of the total population, okay? These typically tend to be people who have learning difficulties, reach a max learning of probably about a 6th grade level of reading and writing. A lot of times mild retardation includes the subcategories or diagnoses of maybe Down syndrome. high functioning Down syndrome, possibly some people that may fall into the autism spectrum. So this can include a number of diagnoses. Moderate retardation, okay, is 35 to 49. This includes 10% of those people that are considered mentally retarded. So a 35 score of 35 to 49 would qualify somebody into the moderate retardation category. These are people that need to really work under supportive conditions. We're talking about people who can read, write, maybe at a second grade level, need a lot of support if they work, meaning that they have somebody that would usually do a lot of training with them, and the job ability would be something that is very entry level. Okay. As I said, do not learn to read or write or do math probably more than about a second grade level. All right. Severe retardation, that's 20 to 34 on an IQ score. And I'm going to be honest with you, these people don't take the IQ test on their own. They're read the questions, answer maybe 5, 6 of the questions. Usually the Stanford-Binet is not what they use. They'll use a different test that we'll talk about on next week. So this is 3 to 4% of those that qualify as mentally retarded. They need constant supervision. These are people that are never going to probably live on their own, need constant supervision, maybe live in group homes, things like that. And then profound retardation, these are people that do not really function on their own at all. So how do they even take the test? We don't really even go there with the test. Profound retardation is something that's very noticeable. We don't need an IQ test to help us figure that out. This is 1 to 2% of those who qualify as mentally retarded in our U.S. population. I would say that, profound retardation person likely is not able to feed themselves, not able to change themselves or take care of basic hygiene practices. These are people who have to have full assistance in life. It used to be that there were horrible categories associated with these, such as imbecile, idiot, and I don't even remember the other one. I'm sure you can write in the comments if you remember. It's not something I really teach because we've gotten long ago rid of these categorizations. And so we still do use the titling of mild, moderate, severe, profound retardation. Okay. And as it says, barely can communicate. All right, causes of mental disabilities can be cultural, familial, as you saw with Jeannie, inadequate mental stimulation, neglect, abuse, things like that. Poor diet, little or no medical care. We know that diet has a lot to do with the formulation of the brain and the connectivity of the neurons. We've talked about that, how babies have to have high-fat diets in order to create that myelin sheath to make those connectivities. So that can be a cause of mental disabilities, is a child that is neglected, abused, as in the case of Jeannie. Genetic defects is probably the biggest cause, and that's just the genes, whether that be gene mutation or genes that combined together between the parents, the mother and the father, have some bad combination. In terms of genetic defects with Down syndrome, that would be that 21st chromosome, so that doesn't really develop. Brain damage can also be a cause of mental disabilities, trauma to the brain. Fetal alcohol syndrome, mother taking drugs during her gestation periods. So that can all be causes of that. Hypoxia, whether that's a type of fluid on the brain, things like that happen possibly when the baby is being delivered, can cause those types of mental disabilities. So we'll talk about the Wechsler scales later. So that is it for our lecture today. In our next class, you are going to take the Stanford-Binet test. It is a bootleg copy, So I will explain in my next video about how to approach this test, simply because the quality of some of the pictures are not great. A lot of students don't know what to expect with the Stanford-Binet. It is definitely not what you will likely expect of an intelligence test. So don't be too worried about like, oh, I do horrible on SAT and ACT stuff, because it is nothing like that, okay? So with that said, guys, you do have a 2-3 sentence response to today's lecture. Your thoughts about what we talked about, your thoughts about possibly taking the test. And so, yeah, there you go, guys. Wishing you a happy Wednesday. Try to stay warm in this cold spell that we're having. I'm going to let Tribe Called Quest take us on out. Bye, guys. We don't believe you, because we the people. We don't need you.